And first, our top story, which comes to us from the city of Oakland and the port of Oakland, as that city has decided to sue protesters of the AB5 law that stopped traffic from entering or exiting much of the port. Clarissa Hawes joins us now. It's never good when she knocks on your door, my friends. What's going on?
I know, the bad news bear strikes again.
Unless it's a dinner party, then it's all good. How you doing, Clarissa?
Yeah. Good. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for joining us again with the updates to this story. And it seems like they just kind of keep rolling out of California with the AB5 law. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on now. The city of Oakland deciding to sue the protesters. But is this even something that can happen? Because, don't you have the right to assemble under your First Amendment rights?
Not in Oakland.
Yes, and that is at the center of this is that, in previous efforts, with, wanting to, working toward better working conditions at the port, that anyone that was named an organizer in one of these protests was sued in some way. If they leased property, to park their trucks, they were evicted or different things like that. So in this case, no one really wanted to step up to be the leader, and none of these guys really were the leaders. In one case, one guy was there. He was in his mid-70s, not part of the protest. He heard there was good food there and just, decided to drive down and talk to some people and eat some food. And the port had hired a private investigator and saw him talking to people and, followed him back to his truck and, zoomed in on the license plate. And he found out on Friday that he was to appear in court on Monday because the port was seeking a temporary restraining order to prevent protesters from continuing to gather. But in this case, the protest had been over for over a week, when, by the time that the drivers were served. And so it's, from what I'm hearing from other legal professionals is that this is an attempt to block any future action that it might, I think when I talked to port officials yesterday, they were a little surprised that the judge didn't grant the temporary restraining order and asked for more time to review this and before making his ruling. And so when I went back to the communications director at the port, he's like, hang on a minute, let me check this out. And he came back and he said, yeah, you're right. I had some drivers that had signed in via Zoom government call, and one guy, because his driver didn't speak English, he, the owner of a company, he, was, since his driver didn't have time to get counsel or anything over the weekend, he stepped in just to interpret and kind of explain what was going on. And he said that his driver was not blocking terminals. He just, heard there was food and friends and wandered down one day. So it's kind of a stumper for a lot of people.
Yeah, no picnics on Port Authority grounds, I guess, is what's going on. So they didn't. So they left the. They didn't sue for any money, or they left a monetary value or something like that as undeclared. So the sole purpose really is not to recover any losses, right? It is to really prevent blockage of operations moving forward. Is that what we're to think of that because of that segment?
Yes, because they're thinking that if they can get a temporary restraining order, then they can get an injunction, which would make it illegal, for and enforceable for law enforcement to come in and arrest anybody for even lingering around the port outside of the barricades, even so there's been talk, on back channels of another effort. I haven't heard that about Oakland, but I've definitely heard some talk about LA Long Beach, and the situation there. And so, like a combined, effort between port drivers at the three, busiest ports in California would really hurt, a lot of the, container movement there. But in talking to these owner operators, they send me messages where they have tried to reach out to their assembly members, because that's what they're saying. Your recourse is to talk to, even though the law is passed and, it's on the books and everything, they're still trying to, and they're like, no, we support AB5. We don't want to meet with you. You're not going to change our mind. And they just felt like, as independent owner operators, they didn't have a lobbying power. They didn't have the financial resources to do this. And so by making a stand, this was their desperate last attempt to be heard. And in some ways it was very effective. But when you leave, a lot of the drivers said they left governments where intimidation practices, by the government, like anything that they did to kind of express their free speech or anything was met with, intimidation tactics and force, and that they were surprised to come here to the U.S. and the land of opportunity and find that the port, from their perspective, is engaging in the same types of tactics.
So, Clarissa, obviously this centers around the AB5 protest and the protest with the port drivers and the port workers. But could this have overarching implications for the ILWU workers if they were to decide to go on strike and to picket/protest at the other ports as well as a part of their labor negotiations? Like, would this create just kind of a blanket, I guess, restriction on protesting on any port grounds, no matter for the reason? And then could that have an impact on the unionized workers later down the road?
Well, when I was out there, I met with the union, the dock workers, who said, hey, like, we may need you, like, we stand with you because we may need you, even though that wasn't the official statement from the ILW, like Local 10. That wasn't their official statement. No. But, like, when I was there, the dock workers were saying, hey, to be effective, you need to stand here. You need to hold your sign here. You need to get here earlier, because, hey, we won't cross if you're already lined up. But if the gates aren't blocked, we're going, we have no reason to say, hey, we can't go to work today. So, yes, in some way, like yes, in talking to the dock workers there, they're not happy working without a contract. They were like, if we get injured on the job, without a contract, what does that mean? What happens to us, and different scenarios they were talking about. And, like, they were definitely said, like, we stand with the truck drivers, not coming from the powers that be there, but from the workers, and then saying, yeah, we may need you in a couple months. And so, well, this is what we can do for you now. And the port is saying that, that the dock workers didn't cross the protest line because of, health and safety reasons. Yeah. But there really was nobody was intimidating anyone. It was very, shaking of hands. From what I saw, there was an incident with one that has been played, and that's kind of been the sole example where one said, about blocking, the gate and him going to work. But that was, for the most part, it was the exact opposite. And there was kind of like, we understand, we're kind of in the same, we're working without a contract. We're going to need support. And that means, that truck drivers can't work, like, because if there's nobody to work the ships or the docks, then, the truck drivers won't be able to pull their containers. So it will, prevent them from working as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, and I agree with your question. It's interesting that they can or go to the lengths to remove and try and get restraining orders against picketers in this situation. But like you said, at ILWU, they don't. Right. And it's really interesting because. I mean, we all know what's going on here. They're trying to force them into being unionized. so there's a lot of. I mean, let's not sugarcoat this. That's exactly what's happening. They're trying to force these contractors into being unionized, and the state supports that. So that's pretty much what's going on there. That's my take, anyways. Yeah. But moving forward, as Kaylee said. The interesting part is if you've got a unionized workforce, the ILWU, that is supporting drivers who don't want to be forced to become unionized, which I think is an interesting dynamic that is playing out there.
Yes, but definitely from the leadership, they went back. After I wrote my story about that, they refused to cross the line. That there was 100 that said, hey, we're not mad at you. But then definitely the local 10 president came out with a statement later saying, that they do support AB5. And then, the higher ups as well issued statements, saying the same thing. We support AB5. So they're saying, well, this was just that for their health and safety reasons, they felt unsafe to cross when, right. If I'm there and, nobody, and watching this and talking to and interviewing people that I didn't see any unsafe activity where people were threatening anyone. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but a lot of desperate owner operators right now. And it's really a sad situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. And Clarissa, thank you for covering this for us. We appreciate your updates as always. We will talk to you again soon. Right now, we're going to head over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning with Donnie and Tony.